The darkness of space held many secrets, but none as terrible as the fleet that moved through it like death itself. Admiral Vexthul stood on the bridge of his massive ship, watching the stars pass by through the huge windows. His ship was called the Devourer of Worlds, and it was bigger than most cities. Around it, hundreds of other ships moved in perfect formation, each one ready to bring destruction to any world that dared to resist. The Cytherian Empire had been expanding for over 50 years. They had taken 17 star systems without losing a single major battle. Their ships were powerful beyond imagination. Their weapons could destroy entire planets, and their soldiers were trained from birth to conquer and kill. No species had ever been able to stop them for long. Vexthul looked at the star charts displayed on his command screen. The next target was a small system with only one inhabited planet. The reports said the creatures there called their world Earth, and they had barely learned how to travel between stars. Their technology was primitive, their ships were small, and they had no real military to speak of. It would be an easy victory, just like all the others. How long until we reached their system? Vexthul asked his second-in-command, a tall alien, with gray skin and cold black eyes. 6 hours, Admiral, came the reply. Our scouts report no significant defenses. A few patrol ships, some space stations, nothing that could threaten even our smallest vessels. Vexthul smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Good. We will crush them quickly and move on to more important targets. This Earth will barely slow. Use down. But far away, in the inner part of the solar system, things were not as quiet as the Cytherians believed. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, Earth's most advanced warship. He was a tall man with brown hair and serious blue eyes, and he had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. The ship around him hummed with activity. Crew members ran back and forth, checking weapon systems and making final preparations. The Defiance was beautiful and deadly, with sleek lines and powerful engines, but compared to what was coming, it looked like a toy. Sir, we're getting reports. From the outer sensor posts, said Lieutenant Mary Johnson, the ship's communications officer. She was young, maybe 25, with red hair and a nervous expression. The alien fleet is huge. Our computers are having trouble counting all the ships. Jake nodded grimly. They had known this day would come eventually. For the past 10 years, Earth had been picking up radio signals from destroyed civilizations. Desperate final messages from worlds that had fallen to the Cytherian Empire. Humanity had listened to the screams and pleas of dying species, and they had learned to be afraid, but fear had made them strong. Admiral Lisa Carter's voice came through. The ship's communication system. She was the commander of Earth's entire space fleet, a woman who had dedicated her life to protecting humanity. Her voice was calm and steady, even though everyone knew how bad their situation was. All ships. This is Admiral Carter. The enemy. Fleet has entered our system. They outnumber us 6 to 1, and their ships are much larger than ours. By every measure that matters, we should lose this fight badly. Jake could hear the tension in his crew's voices as they listened. Some of them were barely out of training, young men and women who had joined the Space Navy, hoping for adventure among the stars. None of them had expected to face the destruction of their entire species. But, Carter continued, they don't know what we've learned about them. They don't know about the weapons we've built or the tactics we've developed. Most importantly, they don't know that humanity has spent its entire history preparing for a fight exactly like this one. On the bridge of the Defiance, Jake looked around at his crew. There was Tom Bradley, the weapons officer, a big man from Texas who could shoot the wings off a fly at 1,000 miles. There was Susan Clark, the ship's doctor, who had volunteered to stay on the bridge, even though her place was in the medical bay. There was young Pete Wilson, barely 19, who ran the ship's engines with the skill of someone twice his age. These people represented the best of humanity, and Jake knew that millions more just like them were scattered across the 47 ships of Earth's fleet. They were farmers and teachers, mechanics and scientists, people who had never wanted to be soldiers, but who would fight to their last breath to protect their home. "Enemy fleet is changing course," reported the ship's sensor operator, a quiet woman named Linda Foster. "They're heading directly for Earth. Estimated arrival time is 4 hours." Jake activated his personal communicator and connected to the other ship captains. The faces that appeared on his screen showed the same mixture of fear and determination that he felt in his own heart. These were people who had families waiting for them back on Earth, children who were depending on them to come home safely. "You all know the plan," Jake said quietly. "We make them think we're weak and scared. We let them believe their intelligence reports were right. We fall back toward Earth and make it look like we're running away." Captain Dan Rogers of the USS Thunderbolt nodded grimly. His ship was one of the newer ones, faster and more maneuverable than the older models. "My crew is ready, Jake. We'll put on a good show for them." Captain Amy Davis of the destroyer USS Lightning spoke up next. She was one of the youngest captains in the fleet, but she had proven herself in dozens of smaller battles against pirates and raiders. "What about the civilians? Are they really going to evacuate the cities?" "The evacuation is already underway," Jake replied. "But we all know that if we lose this fight, there won't be anywhere for them to run. This is it. This is the battle that decides whether humanity survives or dies." The next few hours passed slowly. Earth's fleet moved into position, taking what looked like defensive positions around their home planet. To the approaching Cytherians, it would look like a desperate last stand by a primitive species that knew they were about to die. But hidden, in the asteroid belt, in the shadow of Earth's moon, and in dozens of other carefully chosen locations, humanity's real weapons waited. The Cytherians expected to find a weak and frightened enemy. Instead, they were about to discover that humanity had turned their love of war stories and strategy games into the deadliest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge and watched the enemy fleet grow larger on his screens. Soon, the real battle would begin, and the universe would learn that Earth's children did not go quietly into the dark. The Cytherian fleet moved through space like a pack of hungry wolves. Admiral Vexthol watched the tactical displays with satisfaction as his ships approached the inner solar system. The human vessels ahead of them looked small and weak, scattered around their planet like frightened animals. "Contact the lead human vessel," Vexthol ordered. "It is time to offer them the chance to surrender." The communication officer, a thin alien with pale skin and large eyes, worked at his controls for several minutes before looking up. "Sir, we are having difficulty with their language. Our computers are still learning to translate their speech patterns." Vexthol waved a dismissive hand. "It doesn't matter. They will understand our meaning soon enough." On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Lieutenant Mary Johnson suddenly looked up from her communication console. "Captain Morrison, we're receiving a transmission from the lead alien ship. It's not very friendly, sir." Jake Morrison nodded grimly. "Put it through to the main speakers. Let everyone hear what we're dealing with." The voice that came through the ship's communication system was harsh and mechanical, filtered through translation computers that struggled to convert alien thoughts into human words. But the meaning was clear enough. "Primitive species of the third planet," the voice announced. "You will surrender without fighting, or we will destroy every living thing on your world. Your ships are too small and too few to challenge the great Cytherian Empire. Give up now, and your deaths will be quick." A cold silence fell over the bridge. Jake could see the fear in his crew's eyes, but he could also see something else, anger. These aliens had come to their home and threatened their families, their friends, everyone they cared about. The fear was still there, but it was being pushed aside by something much stronger. "Open a channel to respond," Jake ordered, "and patch it through to Admiral Carter." Admiral Lisa Carter was on the bridge of her flagship, the USS Prometheus, when the alien message reached her. She listened carefully, her face showing no emotion as the mechanical voice delivered its ultimatum. Around her, the ship's crew waited for her response. Carter had spent years studying everything humanity knew about the Catherian Empire. She had read the final messages from dozens of destroyed civilizations, listened to recordings of their last desperate battles, and learned from their mistakes. She knew exactly what kind of enemy they were facing. "This is Admiral Lisa Carter, commander of Earth's defense fleet," she said, her voice carrying clearly across space to the alien ships. "Your demand for surrender is rejected. If you want our world, you will have to fight for it." The silence that followed lasted almost a full minute. When the alien voice came back, it carried a note of amusement that made Jake's skin crawl. "Your courage is admirable, but foolish," Admiral Vexthul replied. "We have conquered 17 star systems and destroyed fleets much larger than yours. The Catherian Empire has never been defeated in battle. You are about to become extinct." On his bridge, Vexthul turned to his tactical officer. "How many human ships do our sensors detect?" 47 vessels, Admiral," came the reply. 5 heavy ships, about 20 medium-sized vessels, and the rest appear to be small patrol craft. Their largest ship is less than half the size of our smallest destroyer." Vexthul laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Pathetic. Begin the attack. Target their heavy ships first. Once we destroy their main vessels, the others will scatter like frightened insects." But the Catherian admiral didn't know about the years of preparation that had gone into this moment. He didn't know about the secret weapon factories hidden in Earth's asteroid belt, or the new technologies that human scientists had developed by studying captured alien equipment. Most importantly, he didn't know about the trap that was already closing around his fleet. Captain Ryan Davis commanded the USS Thunderbolt, one of Earth's newer ships. His vessel was fast and well-armed, but it was still tiny compared to the alien dreadnoughts approaching them. As he watched the enemy fleet draw closer, he thought about his wife and 2 young children back on Earth. "Sir, we're receiving orders from Admiral Carter," reported his communications officer, a young man named Steve Parker. "We're to begin the withdrawal pattern. Make it look like we're scared and running away." Ryan nodded and turned to his pilot. "You heard the order, Lieutenant Brown. Take us back toward Earth, but make it look sloppy. I want them to think we're panicking." Across the human fleet, similar orders were being carried out. Ships that had been in perfect formation suddenly seemed to lose coordination. Some vessels appeared to suffer engine problems, falling behind their squadrons. Others veered off course as if their pilots were too frightened to think clearly. Too. The Catherians, it looked exactly like what they expected to see, a primitive species falling apart under pressure. What they didn't realize was that every movement had been carefully planned and practiced for months. Lieutenant Commander Sandra White was on the bridge of the destroyer USS Lightning when the retreat began. Her job was to make her ship look damaged and helpless, drifting slowly toward Earth as if its engines were failing. In reality, the Lightning was one of the most advanced ships in the fleet, equipped with experimental weapons that the aliens had never seen before. "How are we doing on the fake distress signals?" Sandra asked her communications officer. "Broadcasting on all frequencies, ma'am," came the reply. "To anyone listening, we sound like our main reactor is about to explode, and our life support is failing." Sandra smiled grimly. Perfect. Let them think we're helpless. They'll learn the truth soon enough. On the alien flagship, Admiral Vextil watched with satisfaction as the human fleet seemed to fall apart before his eyes. Several ships were clearly damaged, others were fleeing in panic, and none of them were maintaining proper battle formations. Exactly. As predicted, he told his second-in-command. These creatures have no discipline, no training. Their ships may be individually competent, but they fight like wild animals instead of soldiers. The Catherian fleet moved steadily forward, their massive ships cutting through space like knives through paper. They were so confident in their victory that they didn't bother with complex tactics or careful positioning. They simply aimed there, weapons at the largest human ships, and prepared to open fire. But hidden throughout the solar system, other preparations were being made. Captain Jenny Adams piloted a small scout ship that was drifting dark and silent near one of Jupiter's moons. Her vessel was powered down completely, invisible to the alien sensors, while she transmitted targeting information to the main fleet. "Enemy formation is exactly where we predicted," she whispered into her communicator. "They're moving in a straight line toward Earth. No scouts, no flanking movements. They're walking right into the trap, deep in the asteroid belt, automated." Systems that had been waiting for months suddenly came online. Weapons platforms disguised as rocks began charging their power systems. Mines that looked like space debris started preparing for detonation. And in hidden bases scattered throughout the solar system, humanity's secret weapons began their final countdown. Admiral Vextil was reviewing the battle plan when his fleet crossed an invisible line in space. Behind them, human ships continued their fake retreat. Ahead of them, Earth hung in space like a blue jewel, seemingly defenseless and waiting to be conquered. The Admiral had no way of knowing that he had just led his entire fleet into the most sophisticated military trap in galactic history. The moment Admiral Vextil had been waiting for finally arrived. His massive fleet was now close enough to Earth to begin the final attack. The human ships ahead of them looked broken and scattered, like leaves blown by a strong wind. Some were drifting helplessly, others were trying to flee toward their planet, and a few seemed to have given up entirely. "Begin the bombardment," Vextil ordered, his voice filled with satisfaction. "Target the largest human vessels first. Once we destroy their main ships, the rest will surrender or die." The Catherian weapons officer, a large alien with 4 arms and metal implants covering half his face, began charging the fleet's main guns. These weapons could punch holes through entire mountains, and they had never failed to destroy any ship they were aimed at. But something was wrong. Lieutenant Sarah Williams sat in the pilot's seat of her tiny scout ship, the Raven, holding her breath as alien dreadnoughts passed within a few hundred yards of her position. Her ship was completely powered down, drifting like a piece of space junk, while the massive enemy vessels moved past her hiding spot. Sarah was only 23 years old, a farm girl from Iowa who had joined the Space Navy because she wanted to see the stars. Now she was closer to alien warships than any human had ever been, and her job was to send targeting information back to the human fleet. "Eagle Base, this is Raven," she whispered into her communicator, using a special frequency that the aliens couldn't detect. "Enemy fleet is in position. Count 347 ships, including 28 of their biggest dreadnoughts." Admiral Lisa Carter received Sarah's message on the bridge of her flagship. Around her, the command crew worked quietly. At their stations, their faces tense but determined. Everything depended on the next few minutes. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," she said, opening a channel to the entire human fleet. "Enemy vessels are in the target zone. Prepare to execute. Phoenix Protocol on my command." Captain Jake Morrison felt his heart racing as he listened to the Admiral's words. The Phoenix Protocol was humanity's most desperate plan, a strategy that had never been tested in real combat. If it worked, they might have a chance to win. If it failed, Earth would be destroyed within the hour. Weapons officer, are all systems ready? Jake asked. Tom Radley, the big Texan who ran the ship's weapons, nodded grimly. All antimatter torpedoes are armed and ready, sir. Our targeting computers are locked onto their command ship. Jake looked around at his crew. These brave men and women had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission, and not one of them had complained or asked to be transferred to safer duty. They represented the best of humanity, and he was proud to serve with them. Across the human fleet, similar conversations were taking place. Captain Ryan Davis on the USS Thunderbolt was making final checks on his ship's experimental fusion drive. Captain Sandra White on the USS Lightning was coordinating with the mind fields that had been secretly placed throughout the solar system. Captain Jenny Adams, still hiding near Jupiter's moons, was preparing to reveal humanity's most closely guarded secret, a secret that no alien species had ever discovered was hidden in Earth's asteroid belt. For the past 5 years, human engineers had been building weapons platforms disguised as ordinary rocks. These platforms looked exactly like asteroids to any sensor scan, but they were actually armed with the most powerful weapons humanity had ever created. Engineer Diana Foster worked frantically in the engine room of the USS Thunderbolt, pushing the ship's power systems beyond their normal limits. The new antimatter engines were holding steady, but the readings on her control panels showed they were operating far above safe levels. One small mistake, one moment of equipment failure, and the entire ship would disappear in a burst of pure energy. "How are we doing down there, Diana?" Captain Davis asked over the ship's internal communication system. "Holding together so far, sir," Diana replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. "But I can't promise how long these systems will last if we push them much harder." "Just give me 10 more minutes," Davis said. "After that, it won't matter anymore." Admiral Vexthal was still admiring the tactical displays when everything went wrong at once. The space around his fleet suddenly erupted in brilliant explosions as hundreds of hidden mines detonated simultaneously. The mines had been drifting in space for months, looking like ordinary debris, but each one carried a fusion warhead powerful enough to crack open a battleship. "What is happening?" Vexthal screamed as his flagship shuddered under the impact of nearby explosions. Where did those weapons come from? His tactical officer was staring at his displays in shock. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. It appears the humans have been hiding weapons platforms in the asteroid belt. 3 of the largest Cytherian dreadnoughts were already venting atmosphere and debris there. Massive holes cracked open by the perfectly placed mine explosions." But that was only the beginning of humanity's surprise. The rocks in the asteroid belt suddenly came alive as the hidden weapons platforms revealed themselves. What had looked like ordinary asteroids began unfolding like deadly flowers, exposing particle beam cannons and missile launchers that had been concealed for years. Captain Jenny Adams smiled grimly as she powered up her scout ship and began transmitting targeting data to the asteroid weapons. "All platforms, this is control. You have multiple targets at the following coordinates. Commence firing." The response was immediate and devastating. Beams of pure energy lanced out from dozens of hidden positions, striking Cytherian ships with surgical precision. The aliens had been expecting a conventional battle against a weaker enemy. Instead, they found themselves trapped in a carefully planned ambush that used every advantage humanity could create. But the biggest surprise was still coming. "Admiral." Carter's voice cut through the chaos of battle like a sword. "All ships, execute Phoenix Protocol now. Repeat, Phoenix Protocol is now active." Around the solar system, human vessels that had appeared damaged and helpless suddenly came back to life. Their engines blazed with new power as experimental fusion drives pushed them to speeds that should have been impossible. Ships that had been drifting like debris suddenly accelerated toward the alien fleet with the fury of avenging angels. Captain Jake Morrison felt the crushing force of acceleration as the USS Defiance pushed its experimental engines far beyond their design limits. The ship's artificial gravity struggled to compensate as they closed the distance to their primary target, Admiral Vexthal's flagship. 30 seconds to weapons range, reported Tom Radley. All antimatter torpedoes are armed and ready to fire. Jake gripped his command chair as the ship shook around him. Through the bridge windows, he could see the massive alien flagship growing larger every second. It was still huge compared to his ship, but it was no longer invincible. Human ingenuity and determination had found a way to hurt it. The Cytherian Empire had conquered 17 star systems because they had always fought the same kind of battle, overwhelming force against inferior technology. But humanity had spent years studying their tactics and developing countermeasures. Every science fiction movie, every war game, every military simulation had contributed to this moment. Admiral Vexthal watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet was torn apart by an enemy he had dismissed as primitive. How was this possible? These humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel, yet they fought with weapons and tactics that would impress the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The truth that was becoming clear to him was that humanity had done something no other species had ever managed. They had prepared for this exact battle for their entire history, imagining every possible threat and developing responses that other civilizations would never consider. As his flagship shuddered under another barrage of human weapons, Admiral Vexthal began to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. He had expected to find a weak and frightened enemy. Instead, he had discovered a species that had turned their love of warfare into the deadliest military force the galaxy had ever seen. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Cytherian fleet, which had seemed unstoppable just minutes before, was now fighting for its very survival against an enemy they had completely underestimated. Explosions lit up the darkness of space as human ships and alien vessels clashed in desperate combat. Admiral Vexthal stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his tactical displays with growing horror. 3 of his largest dreadnoughts were already destroyed, their wreckage floating in space like broken toys. Dozens of smaller ships were damaged or drifting helplessly, their crews either dead or struggling to keep their vessels from exploding. "How many ships have we lost?" he demanded. His tactical officer, a thin alien with shaking hands, checked his instruments before answering. 47 vessels destroyed, Admiral. Another 63 are heavily damaged and unable to fight effectively. The humans are targeting our command ships with incredible accuracy. Vexthal couldn't believe what he was hearing. In less than an hour, the supposedly primitive humans had destroyed nearly a third of his mighty fleet. How was this possible? Their ships were smaller, they had fewer vessels, and their technology should have been centuries behind Cytherian science. Captain Jake Morrison felt the deck shake beneath his feet as the USS Defiance fired another barrage of antimatter torpedoes at the enemy flagship. His ship was moving faster than it had ever moved before, pushed by experimental engines that were operating far beyond their safety limits. "Direct hit on their main gun turret," reported Tom Bradley. "From the weapons station, their primary cannon is offline." Jake nodded grimly. The alien flagship was still massive and dangerous, but it was no longer the invincible monster it had seemed when the battle began. Human weapons, designed specifically to exploit weaknesses in Cytherian technology, were proving devastatingly effective. "Engine room, how are our power systems holding up?" Jake asked over the ship's communication system. Engineer Diana Foster's voice came back strained but determined. "We're running at 130% of maximum safe power, Captain. I can't promise how much longer the containment systems will hold, but we're still flying." Around the solar system, similar battles were being fought by dozens of human ships. Each vessel was pushing itself to the absolute limit, their crews performing acts of heroism that would be remembered for generations. Captain Ryan Davis commanded the USS Thunderbolt as it dove between two alien cruisers, its weapons blazing. His ship was smaller and faster than the enemy vessels, allowing it to strike quickly and then escape before the aliens could respond effectively. "Lieutenant Brown, take us around their port side," Davis ordered. "Tom, prepare a full spread of quantum torpedoes." The Thunderbolt's pilot, a young woman from California named Lisa Brown, threw their ship into a spiraling dive that brought them within a few hundred yards of the alien cruiser's hull. At that range, their weapons could punch through the enemy's shields like they were made of paper. "Firing now," called out Weapons Officer Tom Green. 6 torpedoes streaked across the short distance and exploded against the alien ship's side, tearing huge holes in its armor, plating Dot, but the human ships weren't fighting alone. The hidden weapons platforms in the asteroid belt continued to provide covering fire, their particle beams reaching across millions of miles to strike alien vessels with deadly precision. The mines that had been secretly placed throughout the system kept exploding, catching enemy ships that tried to escape the main battle. Captain Jenny Adams coordinated the asteroid platforms from her scout ship, which was still hidden near Jupiter's moons. Her job was to direct the remote weapons toward the most important targets, making sure that every shot counted. "Platform 7, this is Control," she said into her communicator. "Enemy command ship at coordinates 47 Alpha. Range is 2.3 million miles. You have a clean shot." "Understood, Control. Firing now." A beam of pure energy reached across space and struck the Catherian command ship's bridge, causing a series of secondary explosions that left the vessel drifting helplessly. Another enemy ship was out of the fight, its crew either dead or too busy trying to save their own lives to threaten Earth. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about the battle was how the human ships worked together. Instead of fighting as individual vessels, they operated as a single organism, each ship's actions perfectly coordinated with all the others. Years of joint training and shared communication networks allowed them to respond to threats and opportunities with superhuman speed. Captain Sandra White commanded the destroyer USS Lightning as it worked with 2 other ships to surround a large alien battleship. The 3 human vessels moved in perfect synchronization, their combined firepower overwhelming the enemy's defenses. "Thunderbolt, this is Lightning," Sandra said over the tactical communication channel. "We have them boxed in. Execute attack. Pattern Delta on my mark." "Lightning, this is Defiance," came Jake Morrison's voice. "We're in position, ready to execute. Mark." All 3 ships fired at exactly the same moment, their weapons striking the alien battleship from 3 different directions. The combined assault was too much for the enemy's shields and armor, and the massive vessel exploded in a brilliant fireball that lit up the surrounding space. Engineer Diana Foster worked frantically in the USS Thunderbolt's engine room, her hands flying over control panels as she tried to keep the ship's power systems from overloading. The antimatter containment fields were holding, but barely. Warning lights flashed all around her, and the constant vibration of overstressed machinery filled the air. "Come on, hold together," she muttered to herself as she made another adjustment to the power flow. Just a little bit longer. Diana was 28 years old, a brilliant engineer who had designed many of the improvements that made human ships so effective in battle. She had never wanted to be a soldier, But like so many others, she had volunteered when Earth needed her most. The bridge, Captain Davis felt the ship shudder as another blast from an alien weapon struck their shields. "Diana, I need more power to the forward shields." "Can you give me anything?" "I can reroute power from life support for a few minutes," Diana replied. "But if we take much more damage, we're going to lose containment on the antimatter pods." "Do it," Davis ordered. "We'll worry about breathing later." The battle raged across millions of cubic miles of space, with human and alien ships locked in deadly combat. But slowly, steadily, the tide was turning in humanity's favor. The Cytherians had expected an easy victory against a primitive enemy. Instead, they found themselves outgunned, outmaneuvered, and completely outmatched by human tactics and technology. Admiral Vexthil watched his fleet being systematically destroyed and felt something he had never experienced before: fear. The Cytherian Empire had conquered star systems across the galaxy, but they had never faced an enemy like this. These humans fought with a combination of advanced technology and tactical brilliance that was unlike anything he had ever seen. "Sir, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our ships," reported his communications officer. "They're requesting permission to withdraw from the battle." Vexthil stared at the tactical displays, watching as human ships continued to hunt down and destroy his vessels. His mighty fleet, which had seemed invincible just hours before, was now broken and scattered. More than half of his ships were either destroyed or too damaged to continue fighting. For the first time in his long military career, Admiral Vexthil was forced to consider the possibility that the Cytherian Empire might actually lose a battle. The humans had shown them that superior numbers and larger ships didn't guarantee victory when faced with an enemy who was smarter, better prepared, and absolutely determined to protect their home. A message that was becoming clear to every alien survivor was simple but terrifying. Humanity would not be conquered, and anyone foolish enough to threaten Earth would face the same devastating response that was currently tearing apart the pride of the Cytherian fleet. 6 hours after the battle began, the impossible had happened. The mighty Cytherian fleet, which had conquered 17 star systems without a single major defeat, lay broken and scattered throughout Earth's solar system. Burning wreckage drifted in space where proud warships had once sailed, and the few surviving alien vessels were either surrendering or fleeing in panic toward the outer darkness. Vexthil stood on the bridge of his crippled flagship, the Devourer of Worlds, stared at the tactical displays that told the story of his complete defeat. Of the 347 ships he had brought to conquer Earth, only 68 were still capable of movement. The rest were either destroyed completely or drifting helplessly with dead crews and ruined engines. The human fleet, though battered and reduced 30 ships, still maintained their protective formation around Earth. Their blue and white planet hung in space behind them like a jewel, unmarked by the battle that had raged around it. The humans had not only survived the attack, they had won a victory that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. Captain Jake Morrison walked slowly through the corridors of the USS Defiance, surveying the damage his ship had taken. During the battle, blast holes in the walls had been sealed with emergency patches, and the smell of burned electronics filled the air. Many of his crew members were wounded, and the ship's medical bay was filled with people who had been hurt, fighting for their world, but they were alive, and Earth was safe. "Captain, we're receiving a communication request from the alien flagship," reported Lieutenant Mary Johnson. Her left arm was in a sling from a piece of flying metal that had struck her during the battle, but she was still at her post. Jake nodded and made his way back to the bridge. Around him, his crew worked to repair damaged systems and tend to their wounded shipmates. These men and women had faced impossible odds and won through courage, skill, and sheer determination. "Put the alien commander through to Admiral Carter," Jake ordered, Let her handle the surrender negotiations. Admiral Lisa Carter stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking out at the wreckage of the once mighty Catherian fleet. Her own ship showed the scars of battle, cracked windows, burn marks on the hull, and emergency lighting in several sections where the main power had failed. But the USS Prometheus was still flying, and that was what mattered, the face that appeared. On her communication screen was that of Admiral Vexthul, the Catherian commander who had led the invasion. The alien looked exhausted and defeated, his confidence completely shattered by the events of the past few hours. "This is Admiral Vexthul of the Catherian Empire," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I formally request terms for the surrender of my remaining forces." Carter studied the alien commander for a long moment before responding. "This is Admiral Lisa Carter of Earth's Defense Fleet. Your surrender is accepted. However, there are conditions." Vexthul nodded weakly. "We will comply with any reasonable demands." "First," Carter said, her voice hard as steel, "you will provide us with complete information about your Empire's military capabilities, ship movements, and planned operations. Second, you will carry a message back to your leaders. And third, any of your people who wish to remain here and face trial for war crimes may do so." The alien admiral looked confused. "War crimes? We have fought according to the laws of warfare as recognized throughout the galaxy." Carter's expression didn't change. "The systematic destruction of civilian populations is a war crime by human standards. We have listened to the final transmissions from the worlds you destroyed. We know what your empire does to conquered species." Vexthul was silent for a long moment. He had never considered that the conquered species might be anything more than resources to be used or obstacles to be removed. The idea that their deaths might be considered crimes was foreign to everything he had been taught. "What message do you want us to carry back to the Empire?" he asked finally. Admiral Carter looked directly into the alien's eyes. "Tell them that Earth is not defenseless. Tell them that humanity will not be conquered. And tell them that if any Catherian ship enters our solar system again, it will be destroyed without warning." Captain Ryan Davis stood in the engine room of the USS Thunderbolt, watching engineer Diana Foster work to repair the damaged antimatter containment systems. The young woman had saved their ship, and possibly their lives, with her quick thinking and skilled hands during the battle. "How bad is the damage?" Ryan asked. Diana wiped grease from her hands and looked up from the control panel. "We'll need at least 2 weeks in space dock to replace the primary containment coils. And we'll need completely new antimatter pods. We pushed these systems way beyond their design limits." Ryan nodded. "You did an amazing job, Diana. Without your work down here, we never would have survived that battle." Diana smiled tiredly. "We all did our jobs, sir. That's what saved Earth." Across the human fleet, similar conversations were taking place as crews assessed damage and began the long process of repairs. The victory had come at a cost: 17 ships destroyed and over. 3,000 brave men and women killed defending their home. But their sacrifice had saved billions of lives and sent a message to the galaxy that Earth would not be an easy target. Captain Jenny Adams piloted her scout ship back toward Earth, her mission finally complete. For hours, she had hidden in the outer system, coordinating the asteroid weapons and providing intelligence to the fleet. Her small vessel had played a crucial role in the victory, though few people would ever know about her contribution. "Control, this is Raven," she said into her communicator. "All remote weapon platforms are shutting down. Mission accomplished." "Well done, Raven," came Admiral Carter's voice. "Come home." As Jenny's ship turned toward the blue glow of Earth, she thought about what they had accomplished. Humanity had faced its greatest test and emerged victorious. But more than that, they had proven something important to themselves and to the galaxy. That courage and determination could overcome even the most impossible odds. Lieutenant Sarah Williams was finally able to power up her scout ship and leave her hiding place among the asteroids. For hours, she had drifted silently, while massive alien warships passed nearby, close enough that she could see the details of their hulls. Her targeting information had helped destroy several enemy vessels, making her one of the unsung heroes of the battle. "Eagle Base, this is Raven 2, she said, using her ship's call sign. "I'm coming home." "Welcome back, Raven 2, came the reply from Earth's Orbital Control Center. "Your family has been asking about you." Sarah smiled as she thought about her parents back on their farm in Iowa. They had been worried sick when the alien fleet arrived, but now they would know that their daughter had helped save the world. The final phase of the battle involved rounding up the surviving Catherian ships and processing their surrender. Many of the alien vessels were too damaged to make the journey back to their home systems, and their crews were taken prisoner for questioning and eventual trial. Admiral Vexthul found himself confined to quarters aboard the human flagship, under guard but treated with the respect due to a defeated enemy commander. He spent his time writing reports about the battle, trying to understand how his mighty fleet had been so completely outmatched by what should have been an inferior enemy. Truth that was becoming clear to him was both simple and terrible. The humans had done something that no other species in the galaxy had ever managed. They had prepared for this exact type of battle for their entire history. Every war movie, every strategy game, every science fiction story had contributed to their military thinking. More importantly, they had learned to fight as a unified species rather than as separate nations or factions. When the Catherian Empire attacked Earth, they hadn't faced the military forces of individual countries. They had faced the combined might of an entire world working together toward a single goal. Captain Sandra White commanded one of the human ships that escorted the surviving alien vessels to the edge of the solar system. Her destroyer, the USS Lightning, had taken heavy damage during the battle, but was still spaceworthy. As she watched the defeated Catherian fleet limp away into the darkness, she felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The victory was complete, but the cost had been high. Too many good people had died defending their home, and their sacrifice would never be forgotten. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," came the announcement over the fleet communication system. "The alien fleet has left our solar system. Earth is safe. Well done, everyone. You have all earned your place in history." The celebration that followed was muted by the knowledge of what the victory had cost. Throughout the solar system, human ships began the long journey home to Earth, carrying their wounded and their dead. Memorial services would be held for those who had given their lives, and their names would be remembered forever. But the most important result of the battle was the message it sent to the galaxy. Within days, news of humanity's victory spread to every spacefaring civilization through quantum communication networks and refugee reports. The Catherian Empire, which had seemed unstoppable for decades, had been decisively defeated by a species that most aliens had never heard of. Human isolation was over. Earth had announced its presence to the